Pete, should we hit a little sports? And before we do, pay a little tribute to one fabulous Ohio State football player and Minnesota Viking.
Yeah, one of the greats, one of the all-time greats. He's looked upon as the Viking. I mean, he truly is the Viking.
Here he is, Jim Marshall.
This was the Iron Man of pro football.
I think Jim Marshall is one of the great overlooked names.
Come on, baby, let it all hang out now.
Not how good you are, it's how bad you want it. And I believe that. We want it bad.
No player in the history of the game ever played harder, longer than Jim Marshall.
Jim Marshall comes up with a big play of the game.
282 consecutive games, Pete. That record will not be beaten, even by a punter.
How do you have all those, by the way, how do you have these records that he's got? Why did they keep him from the Hall of Fame? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
If anybody ever has been.
And you know how big this guy was, folks? He was like 6'4" and 250.
Yeah.
My high honor to play next door.
Guys at his position these days.
By the way, that was Alan Page talking.
That was former Chief Justice
he was
of
a
the
special
Minnesota
player.
Supreme Court.
Yep.
Many times you're asked about who are the greatest players. As a coach, you can't say who is the best, but there is a category you do have, and that is special. Jim Marshall was special.
Well, he sure was, John, and a special guy. And if you go back and you start going through all the film of what Jim Marshall accomplished in the terms of, they didn't keep track of sacks back then. So they've gone back and they've taken a look, and it looks like he's somewhere above 130 sacks in his career, on top of the interceptions and fumbles and everything else. And, you know, he was a special guy. He lived to 87 years old, which, quite frankly, when you think about it, being a football player and you live to 87, that almost is a record too. I mean, the guy who's got the most consecutive games as a defensive player or a player is Jim Marshall. He's special. He was considered to be what they called an Iron Man, John, because he could do it all, and he did it all forever. I mean, the guy was the captain of the Minnesota Vikings for 14 years. He was the captain of the Minnesota Vikings. Everybody in the locker room, and you know this because if people don't know, John actually was a ball boy for the Vikings at one point in time in his life as a kid. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just a special guy. I mean, those guys, the Purple People Eaters with Carl Eller, Alan Page. I mean, you know what? And then there was kind of a round table of guys that were the next guy that was part of that whole group or whatever. But I tell you what, those guys were all special, and they all looked up to Jim Marshall. And the reason they did was he was the one sane guy of the D-line who there are great stories about the fact that Bud Grant, and I know we've seen Bud Grant talking about him after this whole thing when he heard, well, Bud's passed away too, but the tears in Bud's eyes when he talks about Jim Marshall in the past was just amazing, because he was such a special player that Bud allowed him to basically sort of guard the defense and took care of all the guys on the defensive side of the ball, and Bud was working with the offensive side of the ball. Just a special guy, John. 4 Super Bowls. I mean, everywhere you look, it's like, wow, Hall of Fame at Ohio State. As you said, 282 consecutive games. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Everything you look at, he's just a special football player and a great person. I mean, he helped out when Matt Blair was doing free camps, football camps in the inner city. I was one of the guys who participated and then came back as a coach to that whole thing. And Matt Blair, credit to him also for bringing guys like Jim Marshall, Carl Eller, and players from around the rest of the NFL, for guys who had no money, as you and I went to a high school like that, Central High School. This was done at North High School in the city here in Minneapolis. Absolutely incredible what players they would bring in. And it was free. The food was free. The coaching was free. Everything was free because they knew these guys didn't have money, right? And it was just it shows you some of the good guys in the NFL.
Yeah, and dirt fields, Pete, with lye. You know, the chalk, as they call it, that's lye. Yeah. It ain't just chalk. And, you know, just dusty as heck. They had to water down those fields all the time to keep the dust down. But one memory, so the guy died, Pete, at least once. On an operating table once he died, and said he looked down and saw his body from above it. Yeah, he almost died on a snowmobile trip where one of the guys froze to death, died. He was special, like you say, Pete. And just a quick funny story. When I was a ball boy, we used to have to knock on the door to wake the players and say, 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock, because they had to go down and eat breakfast. If they didn't, they were fined. So he was the one guy, he and Carl that roomed together, would always say, don't knock on my door. Do not knock on my door. The door would be open because there was no air conditioning in god-awful Mankato, Minnesota, when it's 95 degrees in the summer nights.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there sleeping in there, just with his shorts on, skivvies on, because you can't even sleep with a sheet because it's so freaking hot. So we'd come walking down the hall, knock, 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 7 o'clock, knock, 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 7 o'clock. We'd get to his room and we'd put up our hand every day like we were going to knock, and his hand would start sliding under his bed where he kept his gun. It was like, but yeah, funny guy, great guy. We're going to miss him for sure, because that's a guy with a great history. All right, Pete. What else you got for sports today?
All right, the next one I got for you is Major League Baseball, and we have some funny stuff about that one, but we're not going to use that. But are we using that other clip? I don't know if we are or not, but I think it would be kind of cool to use it. But the ratings for baseball, John, a lot of people wondered, is this really a good idea when you're cutting back and trying to make the games a little bit shorter and doing this and doing that and all of the stuff that goes along with the pitch clock and all of that? Well, let me just tell you, I think it's kind of working, John. And here's why I say that. Fox they're up 10% year over year on the ratings that they're getting right now. ESPN's up 22% on the viewership that they've got right now. And by the way, Major League Baseball, with a few scattered others out there, Major League Baseball is up 18% in attendance. They're averaging 28,000 people per game. Now, when you consider the length of the 162 game season, blah, 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 all the rest of it, that's a pretty amazing number. Now, not everybody is playing at that level, but most are, because you can tell by what you're seeing with those averages. It's really been impressive. I wanted to throw in one thing about the NBA as well, John, because one thing that we talk about all the time is ratings, and the ratings for them have been absolutely terrible throughout the season, throughout the playoffs, throughout the finals. And this might be why. Not only do we have the two small market teams that are going to be playing in Indiana and OKC, but how about this? OKC led the entire NBA in games as far as how much they would blow the team out by, which was just under 13 points. But against Minnesota, John, on the games that they won by 26 points, 15 points, 42 points, and then finished the whole thing up on the fourth game that they needed to win to get over the Timberwolves with 30 points. So gives you a little bit of an idea that this could get really ugly from a ratings perspective if they continue that on, along with the fact that you've got two small market teams and the Knicks are not going to be playing, obviously. So I don't know. Adam Silver is going to have his work cut out for him, John, to try to fudge these numbers around if he's going to do it.
Pete, one quick question for you.
Yeah.
They cut Thibodeau, the coach of the Knicks. They fired him. Now, they've had back-to-back 50-win seasons, first time in forever.
Right.
They made it into the quarterfinals or semifinals, I guess. They made it into the semifinals and got beat, of course, as we said, by the Pacers, and with a little help from Pat McAfee and the crowd. But would you have fired a guy that takes you that close to the promised land, Pete? Was it his fault that they didn't get over against a really good Pacers team? What do you think?
I think he's a little bit quirky, which is one thing, but everybody who ever has hired him knows that ahead of time. So that's not fair to say, well, you're quirky, you're out of here. Because the production, like you're saying, that he brought to the table for the Knicks and put it together, and he had that great trade that they were able to get Big Cat as part of their team as well. And he knew exactly everything he was getting. He delivered. They lost it, the series, but it was a great series. It was, back and forth with Indiana, who's damn good as it turns out, right? So, yeah, to fire Thibodeau is absolutely, I think, outrageous. It just shows you that these owners, they're in it for the money, but it's one of those things where, you got right there. Give the guy one more year. Let's see what happens. And, it's unfortunate because I think he's a really fun coach, a good coach. Real quick story. I was out to lunch one day with 4 or 5 of my old teammates at the University of Minnesota when I had moved back here, and he was the head coach of the Timberwolves. He bought us our entire meal. He just came over and said, "Hey, Pete, really nice to see you, blah, blah, blah," because I did that radio show here in Minnesota. And he comes over, shakes my hand. He goes, "Hey, I got you. Don't worry about it." Walks out. I barely know the guy. So from my perspective, I think that's another great example of these owners. They might have the money and they're really smart in the field they're in, but they really don't know much about football, basketball, hockey, or baseball. That's the problem.
Yep. Well, we're going to have another Rebels Edge tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you guys will join us then and make it a good day of trading. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow.